Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Lytle. I'm the outgoing Executive Director of Province 1 and the moderator for tonight's meeting. Deacons Trucking on the Road to Emmaus is a web-based series designed as a way for deacons to walk with each other and to share stories in hope of animating, supporting, and even renewing diaconal ministries across the country. Inspired by the story in Scripture of the road to Emmaus, where Cleopas and another disciple met a stranger who they didn't recognize until much later was the resurrected Christ. And it was in sharing their stories that they gained confidence and renewal in the ministry that they were about to go back to and start in Jerusalem. This series is sponsored by the New England Deacons Network and the Episcopal Province of New England. They're free live interactive webinars that occur monthly on the third Tuesday, usually from 7 to 8 p.m. And we look forward to sharing case stories, exploring different ministries, offering peer wisdom and feedback, and offering mutual support. This month, we're going to hear from Phina Borgeson about food and food scarcity and advocacy. And we will be recording this conversation so that it's available for viewing by those that couldn't join us tonight. It'll be on the province1.org website as soon as I can after tonight's meeting finishes. Just a couple of quick pointers. If you put your cursor over the bottom of the screen, you'll see a place where you can chat. And we'd love to have you say hello, and it will identify your name as it's identified on the screen. But if you type your own name and where you're from, that will give us a chance to see where people are coming in from. And hopefully we'll have an hour of going deeper and learning a lot together. So Phina, could you start us with prayer?
Sure. I chose this prayer. It's from the book Evangelical Lutheran Worship, which is the most recent hymnal of the ELCA, one of our partner denominations. And so let me offer that. God, our creator, you have ordered seed time and harvest, sunshine and rain. Give to all who work the land fair compensation for the work of their hands. Grant that the people of this and every nation may give thanks to you for food, drink, and all that sustains life. May use with care the land and water from which these good things come, and may honor the laborers who produce them through your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
So let me begin here by just saying a little bit about what I'm about in my community ministry. And I would have to say that the persistent goal for me in my community ministry is helping to build a just and resilient food system. And I'm going to just cue up here a little graphic, which maybe helps us to think about what the components are of a just and resilient food system. The three key ones are environmental health, social equity and human health, and economic vitality. And the thing I like about this is the sort of overlapping circles, which then suggest where different activities that we have in our food system happen. The thing I was thinking about earlier today when I was looking at this particular graphic is really the people that we've just prayed for, the people who work in our food system, both agriculturally and all along the, what do you want to call it, the supply chain of food. They're all in the middle where these various things overlap. And so that's just something to think about as we move along. So I'll just say, I guess the other important thing for me, and I noticed this when I looked at the comments of those who registered, I think in every diaconal ministry, those about food and those about everything else, we always need to find that balance between hands-on work and excuse me, I screwed that up. But anyway, between hands-on work and advocacy. And the reason that I wanted to show you, and I will now show it to you, that picture is because it's a little diptych that I put together. I was going to the conference of the Anglican Deacons in the Church of Canada, and they said, bring a photo of your ministry. I thought, well, how do I capture one thing when I'm involved in, I'm involved in gleaning, and I'm involved in a community garden, and I'm involved in local policy work, and I'm involved with state level policy work, and so on. And I remembered that I had these two pictures. One is of me receiving an award, which is immaterial, but also collecting the latest report on recent legislation in California for a just and resilient food system. And the other is a picture of me on my first glean in an apple orchard just a few miles west of where I live. And I kind of like it because it looks like I've got a hold of the apple. It's kind of reminiscent of some of the graphics you see of Eve, but never mind about that. So I'll go back to just talking for a minute, because I'd like to know, when you think about this, now let me first share a quotation. One of the ways I think about balancing hands-on work and advocacy work is a quotation from Marion Nestle. And I don't know if any of you know her work. She's written books with titles like Food Politics. She's a nutritionist, now a retired professor of nutrition science somewhere in New York City. And she's quite a strong advocate for particularly a healthful food system, but recognizing that that requires strong advocacy work too. And when she was responding one time to some of the people in the food movement, which we all know can reduce to kind of a foodie movement, or a perhaps a exercise in gourmandise, rather than having anything to do with justice seeking, she has said, sure, vote with your fork, picking up on that common slogan. I think Michael Pollan might have promulgated it. She says, sure, vote with your fork, but also vote. And I think, to me, that summarizes those two aspects in my food system ministry of the need to look at adequate and healthful food for everyone, but also the need to not just be involved in charitable activity, but also to vote. So, and get involved in policy. So, okay. So your comments on that, just maybe briefly, if you have any feedback or any questions about that.
No, except to say that I agree with you. I know that I've written some letters to legislators around the food situation, particularly changing the SNAP program. And in Vermont, it would be really detrimental, because if you take away the amount that people pay for utilities, particularly in the wintertime, from their food budget, they're going to really be in a pickle.
Or without pickles.
Well, definitely without pickles. There's no doubt about that. But, yeah.
Pickles being somewhat of a luxury when your food budget is really stretched. But yeah, no, I think we all face those challenges in terms of provision of adequate food for people. And there's always something we can do in the way of advocacy. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we move along. Anybody else want to chime in right now?
So, Phina, I'm wondering what you would say about my gut telling me that the advocacy and hands-on balance, it ebbs and flows, but both are integral to keeping the integrity of that initiative. So, you know, in one moment we might be more hands-on, in another moment we might be more advocate.
Yeah, I think every deacon needs to develop some skills in both, but you also know who your need to know who your partners are to strengthen the ones where your skills are perhaps less well developed or less natural, that you need, it's not your natural gift. You've developed some skill in that area. You developed enough skill to know how to choose some partners who are stronger in that area than you are.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, but there is that need always to be thinking in terms of both. What can I do? I think it keeps us honest too. I mean, it would be easy for me just to sit around and gab about policy because I'm a pretty good gabber. You probably already figured that out. But the fact is that I need to do something hands-on to keep me honest. I keep my hands in the dirt, literally, or to make sure that I'm bringing something to a food pantry so I see how that end of things works, even when I may be advocating more on the environmental end of things with the churches that I visit and work with in my by the way, my role in my deanery, I'm post-parochial, but I have a deanery assignment as a food ministry networker. So I kind of get around to various congregations in my deanery, which is the Russian River Deanery in the Diocese of Northern California. So when I think about, and here I really want to push a little bit on the fact that we deacons are ordained not just to do community ministry, because every baptized person is baptized to do community ministry, but we are also have a role with our congregations and raising awareness with our congregations. And some time ago, I came up with a kind of a fourfold idea of how I like to think about what with our congregational base, also in our communities, we can do food ministry. And the four things that I came up with are, there's sort of four vectors, if you will, or four parameters are consume, produce, advocate, and celebrate. And I think all four of those are important. So I want to talk first a little bit about consume. And now I'm going to have to remember how to do this share thing, because there's a couple things I'd like you to look at. One of the things that are, but I'll get to that in a sec. One of the things about consume is thinking about how we make wise choices for coffee hour, parish events, for our food pantries, and in our households. And I have two guidelines that I think will help you with that. And might be a fun thing to take if there's a group you work with in your congregation or your local food pantry or whatever. One is loaf, and this is a British thing. It comes out of a British environmental group with their food system emphasis. Means when you purchase or procure food, think about four things: local, organic, animal friendly, fair traded. And in most instances, we're not going to meet all four of those at the same time. But when we think about that, it's kind of a good way to review and think about the choices we're making as we think about the food that we're going to consume, or the food that we're going to share with others, or the food that we're going to distribute in any kind of a charitable activity. The other one, and I've got to do a little fancy thing here with the share thing, and find this. Where are we? Can you see this now? It's my blog.
Yep.
And what I want to highlight here is some loaf. By the way, the link to the loaf stuff is on my blog, but also this is the Good Food Purchasing Program. And this started, I believe, with the Food Policy Council of the City and County of Los Angeles. And they developed these 5 criteria, and we would do well to think about them when we, again, plan a parish event, or look at how we're sourcing, even what we have at coffee hour. How about coffee hour? I like a good coffee hour, but animal welfare, the nutritional value, a valued workforce, environmental sustainability, and how it strengthens the local economy. So this is another good one. I maintained this blog for some time, and then I kind of let it fall away for a couple of years. And just halfway through this year, I decided to revive it a little bit. there's not a whole lot that's terribly profound on it, but it's been a good resource aggravator, yeah, aggregator. So it's here if it's helpful to you. I think it's pretty easy to Google. There aren't too many blogs called Just Gleanings. So, because there are a number of resources and thoughts on here that might be helpful going forward. So, let's see. So the other thing that I want to talk about in terms of consume is the whole issue, which has come into great prominence lately, of potentially food waste.
Yeah.
And a number of us have been concerned with this for a long time. It's come into great prominence now because of obviously the impacts on greenhouse gases from food that goes into the landfill.
Mhm.
And one of the things we've decided in my local group here in Sonoma County is that we will not call anything food waste unless it does go to the landfill. Because prior to that, we can think about sharing food with our friends and neighbors. We can think about sharing food with people who have less. We can think about having food go to another food producer, either in the form of food for pigs and chickens or whatever, or food for compost. So there are lots of places extra food can go before it goes to the landfill. One of the things parishes around here have done is get involved in gleaning and food rescue. And this is a way, sometimes gleaning is a great way in season of providing fresh produce for a food pantry or a food bank. And food rescue, gleaning is harvesting. Food rescue is really means any food that's been prepared. And preparation could be even something as washing and cutting up carrots. That's prepared food, okay? So, but it could also be wedding cakes. And some of the food rescue groups around here have done the whole extreme. But there are ways for congregations and congregants to get involved in these efforts and to strengthen what is available to people who have less. So in under this whole rubric of consume, we think about both how we procure food in our homes and congregations and ministries, but we also think about the other end of the sort of supply chain of food, which is what happens when somebody doesn't want it anymore. I also would like, there's a couple things I'd love to see. One is I'd love to see alongside the trash can and the recycling in every congregation, a bucket for compost.
Mm-hmm.
And make arrangements with somebody who does home composting or a local small scale farmer, you know, or maybe you have green bins that pick it up, but there should be 3 bins, not 2.
Mm-hmm.
One should be compost. I just want to show you one more thing here. Share, and we're going to have to go back to this, but I'm going to hit something else here. This is the homepage coming up of the Sonoma County Food Recovery Coalition. This is a group in my area. We started as just a group of gleaners and one food rescue person. And now it's become rather a huge committee and movement that includes people from waste management, from environmental health, which are people concerned about food safety. There's a pig farmer who's a part of it. So, but we've created this website to make it possible for people, if they have food to donate, if they're looking for a place to get food, if they are a business or a household that's looking for ways to reduce food waste, there's all kinds of information here. It needs a little sprucing up right now. It's been up for a few years, but it seems like a good effort. And we're very fortunate to have somebody from our county cooperative extension who had part of her job hours are devoted to helping support this effort. So that's, you know, that's pretty fabulous. So I just wanted you to see that. So that's consume. I'm looking at the time. Yeah, we got plenty of time. So produce. I've got an outline in front of me, so if I'm ever looking down, you know I'm looking at my outline. It's the only way I've been able to teach live online is to have a script as well as my fairly well stocked but not always recoverable memory at this point. So I want to talk about what we can do in terms of production. I noticed, I don't think it's anybody who's on the webinar, but somebody who registered who said that their congregation does have a community garden. And that's one way that many, many congregations have participated in producing food. Again, particularly in producing produce that can strengthen a charitable food activity, but also, you know, the key word in community garden is not garden, it's community. It's a wonderful way of bringing people together. I've been involved in 3 now. I'm in my second one here because unfortunately the city of Santa Rosa closed the one that I founded 12 years ago, but I'm in a new one now. And one of the wonderful things about the one I'm in now, half of the plots are set up as plots that grow food for donation to the closest rather large food pantry. It's a fish food pantry. But the other plots are for individuals or households. And most of those plots are tilled by women who have come from Eritrea. So I'm learning a whole new thing. In terms of a culture that I didn't know anything about. And one of the things I'm going to do this weekend, it's time, almost Thanksgiving, for those of us here on the 38th parallel to plant our garlic. So I'm going to be showing a woman from Eritrea how I plant my garlic. So that's community gardens. But I think the other thing is, I'll cue up a couple photos here while I'm talking. I'm not good at talking and doing something else. It's just doesn't work very well for me. But let's see, where are we? Okay, so I'm gonna, let's see, how do I do this? I can't find the arrow to share the next photo in this folder. There we are. This is another great activity. This is one of the congregations here in Santa Rosa has a relationship with a local farmer. Now that farm has a CSA. You can subscribe and get your weekly box, but they have a relationship with Church of the Incarnation where they bring in produce and they have a farm stand between services on Sunday. And this is a wonderful way to support in local food production for a congregation that doesn't have, this is a downtown church. And so and what little land they have is shaded. So there's no possibility of them growing food, but they can support a local organic farmer. And I think that's, you know, something that many congregations could think about as a way of both strengthening accessibility. This farm stand also will take CalFresh, which is our version of SNAP, and they have Market Match. So if you are eligible for SNAP and you come to church, yeah, you have to come to church. No, if you come to church, you could, between services, you can get double your money for buying your produce on Sunday when you come to church. So it's one-stop shopping. I think it's a great idea, and I really wish more congregations would try this. Also here somewhere, here's just a picture from my current community garden. The sign is below, and the one of the donation plots, they're 12 by 12, one that's filled with greens, kale and beets and collard greens, it looks like, and a couple of rogue sunflowers. This was early in the season. But just to say that there are many ways congregations can participate in food production and strengthening local food production. And some of them involve having land, some of them don't. So, any comments, questions that you have so far about consume or produce? Uh-oh, it just says my internet connection is unstable.
We've been getting some blurring of your words. It's because I think you're on a wireless network, but just keep going. You're fine.
No, actually, this machine is wired.
Okay. Just
So
keep going.
I don't know what the issue is. I think one thing is that it's a really busy time of day because people are either on their machines at work, they're online at work, or they're coming home and feeling like they have to do all this kind of stuff. So it's, yeah. Anyway, so just interrupt me if what I've said is unclear because of the instability of my internet connection. Any questions about consume or produce? Nope. Okay. So, advocate. Catherine mentioned contacting legislators about SNAP. I just wonder if anybody else has seen a way or seen an opportunity to be involved in advocating or even in developing policy around food in their community, or even in an organization. Sometimes organizations, large businesses, for example, hospitals, have a food procurement policy or other policies. And I just wonder if any of you have ever thought about or seen opportunities to do anything like that. Okay. Well, then what I want to do, I just have one more little photo that I want to show you. Share. And we'll move on from the community garden. So one of the things that, this is too much about me, but never mind. I like talking about myself. One of the things I've been really privileged to be involved in for the last 10 years is our county food system alliance. And in some places, these are called food policy councils. And if anyone has a strong interest in food policy or in food ministries, I really recommend getting involved if you can. One of the wonderful things that happened was that when this was forming, I live in a pretty heathen part of the world, and this food system alliance was forming, people said, well, who do we know who's like a church person that we can invite to be a part of this? And somebody mentioned my name. So I've been with it since the beginning. And I was also involved on the policy committee with developing what you see on the right-hand side here is the Sonoma County Healthy and Sustainable Food Action Plan. And this is a lengthy plan with 11 different goals for all different aspects of the food system, including healthy eating, but also including economic vitality, social equity, and agriculture and natural resources. Everything seems to be in fours today. Sorry, it's all right. I never can remember 7 dwarves or 7 of anything, but 4, I can usually get up to 4, remembering things. So, and we've been working on continuing to push this. We had a big push to get every incorporated city to adopt it after the county adopted it. And now the county is a very important form of government in California. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I know it's not as strong a component of government there. But the county here is revising its general plan, which has a lot to do with land use and transportation and open space and all of these things. So we're now trying to figure out how to make sure that the goals in the Healthy and Sustainable Food Action Plan are integrated into this revision of the general plan. So that's the kind of slog work. The image on the left-hand side of the screen is we have a wonderful thing, and I'll show it to you when I leave this share and go back to my head. You're seeing my head, but we have a wonderful magazine called Made Local. The Food System Alliance cooperated with it's a local economy initiative, and I know you have those in some parts of New England, that to strengthen the local economy, and a relocalization of things, money, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but we have a food magazine that they put out, and some of it is very foodie, very trendy, but there's always attention paid to our food action plan. And there's at least one article on justice, and then on the last page, there's a reiteration of one of the 4 pillars of the food action plan. And here it's social equity was highlighted in this issue, which is a couple issues ago. There's like half a dozen issues a year, and they're available at local markets and other local businesses and outlets. And I'll show it to you now. I'll stop this foolishness. And this is the magazine. This is the latest edition, which is about tamales, because Christmas is coming. So if it's not Santa, it's tamales in the part of the world that I live in. So I think that there are lots more opportunities for advocacy. And I would also say that there is some support for that from the Episcopal Church. There have been resolutions about food systems and about food and environment. And even the current grants from the Environmental Climate Change and Environmental Racism Task Force of the Episcopal Church, they're very sensitive to including food ministries in those, but particularly those food ministries where ecological concern and concern, heart for the poor, kind of intersect. And frankly, that's why I'm in food ministry, is because with undergraduate work emphasizing ecology 50 years ago, and my heart for the poor of a deacon, the food is the place where it comes together. And I like to eat too. So, okay, I'm gonna go on to our last one here, and I'm gonna have to try to figure out where my share is on that, because I think I've lost the thread. But the last of the 4-fold approaches to thinking about food, the 4 vectors, if you will, of food concern for the food system, is celebrate, because I think sometimes that's the one we forget, and it ought to be, given who we are as Episcopalians, the one that we're best at. And I have one image to share with you for this, and I'm going to have to find it. Okay, it's not this one. I'm going to have to do some scrambling around on this. So you're going to get a tour of my website. I mean, my desktop, because I need to. Where is it? Where? Part of it is it's hard to see things here. Okay. I'll find it. I like parties, and I think we need to do parties and do them well. This is from a picture taken from a wonderful celebration. I hope you can see it. I sort of remastered it as a Google document. It should be appearing now. And this is, we had several, when you have a diocese that's huge geographically, which Northern California is, when the bishop retires, he gets multiple parties. And this was from the party in our area. And that's Monty from St. John's, Petaluma, where the party was held. And that's a cake that he made, decorated with live flowers and, I don't know, filled with mascarpone, and I don't know what all wasn't in it, but it was just incredible. And it was a really wonderful party. And this was the best image. We don't take enough pictures of parties either, but this was the best image that I could find to illustrate just the need to celebrate. I found out, I thought of Monty as a businessman he and his husband have a large adopted family, and they have sheep, and he's a knitter. And I didn't know that he was a veteran of working in a bakery and had this incredible skill, which he trotted out for that party. And that just, to me, was the best image I could find of for celebrate. So I also, you know how things pop up? I mean, you're thinking about one thing and you're sort of distracting yourself by looking at Facebook, and then there's something on Facebook that's perfectly relevant to what you should really be thinking about. And a friend of mine posted a quote from Heschel, a Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, about celebration today. And I wanted to share that with you. And then I've got a question for you for the rest of our time, where we can maybe have just a really sort of a free-for-all conversation. But here's the Heschel quotation. People of our time are losing the power of celebration. Instead of celebrating, we seek to be amused or entertained. Celebration is an active state, an act of expressing reverence or appreciation. To be entertained is a passive state. It is to receive pleasure afforded by an amusing act or a spectacle. Celebration is a confrontation, giving attention to the transcendent meaning of one's actions. I need to think about that a whole lot more, but it just sort of captured in some way for me why I think this fourth movement of celebration in terms of food is so important, and that it be authentic celebration, not just consumption of food procured at Costco. Excuse me. So, okay. Now I have something for you to think about. It's really important, I think, to kind of take a systems view of how each of these four practices kind of contributes to the whole. But that also involves, along the way, taking some small steps in each one and maybe focusing on one at a time and making just a few small steps. Let me put in a little aside here. One of my pet peeves right now is the emphasis on zero waste. I don't think that talking about zero waste doesn't encourage people to do anything. Talking about one step you can take to reduce your waste encourages people because they can latch on to one thing. I'm not a Marie Kondo fan either, but anyway, so in each of these four areas, okay, consume, produce, advocate, celebrate, where do you see opportunities to grow toward a just and resilient food system in your congregation or your community? So that's my question from you. Where do you see an opportunity to make a small step, and how would that action then fit into the whole for a just and resilient food system? So I want you to talk a little bit, and I'll shut up for a few minutes. I want to know who's on the phone. Do we know? Never mind. There's a phone up here. Yeah, Linda, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Phina, Linda Tyson here. I have an opportunity that emerged from an interfaith clergy group meeting I was in earlier today. My rabbi colleague and her cantor were lamenting that they have various celebrations at the synagogue and always have leftover food, but it's prepared food. And there were 20 of us in this room of various different faiths and Christian denominations. And we all experienced, we nodded, okay, we all do this. And the question was raised, what can we do with this? Because there are so few repositories who will accept prepared foods. So they named a couple in our general area, nothing like in our backyard. I wondered if you had some guidance on how we might source repositories of prepared food.
Well, that's a challenging question. I think because every community has different criteria, although they're fairly similar in terms of maintaining food safety.
Right.
Like the number of hours that you can travel around with this food before you give it out. I think one thing that I would start with is making sure that you've done a thorough survey of the places that serve food. For example, we found here that there's one place that will take both prepared food and gleaning on a weekend. And there's only one locally. Most of the food programs are Monday through Friday. But there is one, the Gospel Mission. Of course, it's a theology I don't want to encourage, but never mind. But they will take food on the weekend. So I would think that's one thing to do, is to make sure that you have done a thorough survey, that this is not just sort of random word of mouth. And we've been able to do more of that here lately because we've had some staff and we've used interns to survey where the food outlets are. So that would be one thing. Another thing would be to encourage some kind of a volunteer effort. Like in Marin County here, we have Sonoma County food runners, there's San Francisco food runners. In Marin County, it's called Extra Food. And these are groups of volunteers. They have a phone network. They may have at least one van that has some refrigeration, or they have some big ice chests, and they will do the delivery thing so that it's not just up to the congregation. They'll come and pick it up and then take it somewhere. Another thing that I would love to be more involved with is church kitchens that are commercially certified, or upgrading those that aren't, so that we can preserve food. So for example, if you have some leftovers that you have that have just been gently prepared, you could turn into soup and freeze.
Right.
And have that for somebody's once a week community soup meal, whatever, or their Saturday breakfast or whatever. Those are just some ideas I have off the top of my head.
Thank you. That's great.
But I wonder if others have ideas. I don't know. Catherine, what about you? Have you got any bright ideas along those lines?
Not really. Am I muted or not?
No, we got you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know that a few times I think a few times the Salvation Army will take some things if we take them immediately over to them. But other places, they seem to think that there is some kind of state law against taking food that's already prepared and bringing it in, because they don't know how it was prepared and much about it. And
there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think one thing to do is to check both the federal Good Samaritan law, but also check and see if your state has done any more with that about food donations. And also check, sometimes this can be opening up a can of worms, and nobody wants to eat that. No, but excuse me. But I think your local environmental health can tell you. And now, one of the things we've got going on here is that large concerns large businesses, big restaurants and so on, are now going to be encouraged legally to divert food from the waste stream, but also to see that it goes to feed people.
Well,
so
that'll be the thing in Vermont too, because there's starting next year, everything has to be either composted or nothing's supposed to go to the waste at all.
Right.
So we'll see what happens with that. But.
Well, and what we need to do is we need to encourage the fact that the food, that surplus food goes first to people.
Right,
before
absolutely.
It goes to compost. We had a bad experience here with a food closet, food pantry, rather large one in the Sonoma Valley, and they discovered that all of the markets were giving surplus bread to be composted, and of course, surplus bread has always been something that was in oversupply in terms of feeding low-income people. But suddenly they didn't have any, and they were having to buy bread to give to people because it was either going to animals or it was going to compost. So the EPA has the funnel kind of what you do, and the first thing you do is you reduce the overconsumption. And by the way, that's something we could do at parish events too. You know how I'm a single person, and I always feel like if it's a potluck, I need to bring something for 12 people.
Right.
And I don't need to bring something for 12 people. You bring as many portions as you will eat. Now, I eat a lot, so I would probably have 4 portions of something and a dessert. But that means I need to bring something for 6 people, not for 12 people. So maybe some better guidelines to help people not over contribute to potlucks and community meals in congregations would be another way to deal with some of the surplus. And perhaps the money that we save by doing that, we could give to our local regional food bank. So that's Catherine, what about you? Is there some place that you could see a small step that your congregation or the food ministry you're involved with could make along the lines of the things I've been talking about?
Well, actually, we've just been doing a lot of advocacy around migrant farm workers who work on our dairy farms, because unlike people who work in the orchards and things like where you are, cows have to be milked every day, but they can only get a 9-month visa. So we've done a lot of work around that, and also around bringing large corporations like Ben & Jerry's and people who use the milk to pay fair prices so that the workers are treated more fairly than they have been, because they haven't been treated very fairly. But by some of the farmers are great and they do really nice things, but others could do more, for sure.
Yeah.
I've often wondered, we need to have a stronger certification for domestic fair trade. You know, we have international fair trade for the things that we can't produce ourselves, like coffee and chocolate and other good things.
Right.
But we don't have a strong domestic fair trade policy. And the visa thing is an issue here too. We just had a situation where there were people who were on temporary agricultural visas for the grape harvest, and we had a fire disaster in the northern part of the county where most of the grapes are, and consequently these people were suddenly out of work and not able to connect to get their pay before their visas expired on the 5th of November. So it was really but fortunately, the Episcopal Church in that area and a nonprofit that has been spawned by the Episcopal Church in that area was able to hustle and get some help. And we also have, because of the 17 fire disaster, 2017, we have something called an undocu fund, which is it's a fund that can help meet the needs of people who cannot get government help,
Right.
Because they're undocumented, or they're afraid to approach even when they are eligible because they're afraid of being deported.
Yes.
So,
Well,
yeah.
that happens rather frequently here.
Yeah. So
Unfortunately.
the worker advocacy is really important, and I hope that I'm sure that your diocese is supportive of it's that kind of thing. And I think Vermont probably is about the same size as Sonoma County, so it's a little bit, it's twice the size, I think, but not much bigger. So it seems like you ought to be able to work to really put some pressure on those local companies like Ben and Jerry's.
Oh yeah, they've done that. Now we're working on some of the grocery stores. So
yeah. Well, good for you. Good for you. I think how much time do we have?
We're getting close to the end. We have about 7 more minutes.
Okay. So anything else in terms of where another little step might be taken and how that somehow fits into the whole?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. It's Beatrice Kaigwa. I thank you so much for this conversation about food. The more you talked about it, the more I was envisioning in my community. I help out with the refugees from West Africa, and on Saturdays we meet with the parents and for learning of the life of living in America. But now when I go this Saturday, I want to talk to the leaders of how we can acquire a community piece of land where we can grow our own food. Because we from Africa, we are always in the garden, we are always growing something. So, but coming here, we don't know where to go. But the more I talked about it, the more I thought, yes, we can do this in my community. So on this Saturday, when I go to the center, we are going to talk about how can we get a piece of land in spring next year to start our gardening. Where I live, we have small gardens for families. You know, you pay $15 for the season and you grow whatever you want. But for the community, we need to have a bigger space. So when we come back next time talking about food, I shall be updating you about that to see these refugees in the city of Worcester, Massachusetts. So we need to see where and how is the city going to help us to get a piece of land to grow our own vegetables and food.
What city did you say, Beatrice?
Worcester.
Worcester, Massachusetts. Yeah.
Sometimes
WOR.
Yeah, I know. I grew up in Massachusetts. But it seems to me, even in cities, sometimes there's a vacant lot that is not being used, or that someone in the church may know a landowner who has a piece of land, even if it's a half an acre that you can work together. That'd be a big step in the right direction, I think. It is frustrating with the tiny plots, although the Eritrean women that I garden with, they sort of all take care of one another's plots. So it's become communal, even though it's the individual plots, if you know what I mean. And you probably do. But I want to encourage you to work the networks at the congregation and everybody that everybody knows in the congregation, and just make the need known. And I suspect something will open up, even though you're in the city.
Yes, we are going to talk about this more at my church and also in the center where the refugees meet. So I'm so glad that something will come up.
Well, we'll be praying for you that it does.
Please do. Please do.
Burlington, Vermont has done that. They have in the Intervale, which is a particular area of Burlington, they do have a very large plot of land for people who have come here as new Americans or immigrants. And over the years, it's really increased, and they now are selling at the farmers market some of their excess food, which is great because then the community gets to experience what their foods are.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great advantage to having culturally appropriate foods available to you. And that's something we sometimes forget when we think about people's need for food. Doesn't just need to be enough or just healthful, but it also needs to be culturally appropriate.
I hate to do an interruption here, but I think it's time for us to wrap up. Phina, we are so grateful for you inspiring this helpful conversation. There's obviously a whole lot more that needs to be said, and I encourage us to stay in touch with each other as we try to develop resources across the province, as well as support each other in prayer so that those efforts can be productive. The announcement that I need to make is that we do have these monthly conversations scheduled. December 19th is the one we have coming up next. It's going to be Robin Hollis and Scott Deasy, who are going to be talking about a Jesus movement response to oppression. The description they gave me is that they're going to encourage us into having a highly engaging and interactive session examining how to build capacity for and raise up lay leadership as well as clergy to address social justice, racism, and economic concerns at the diocesan level. So if you're curious at all about ways you can work with your diocesan leadership, this would be a great session to be a part of. To close the evening, I'd like to end, as I always do for Deacons Talking, with a Franciscan benediction. So if you could just take a moment to sit in silence and listen to these words. May God bless us with discomfort and easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live deep within our hearts. May God bless us with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that we may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless us with tears to shed for those who are suffering pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. And may God bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we can make a difference in this world, so that what we do with one another can do what people claim cannot be done, bringing justice and kindness to all our children and to the poor. We ask this all in Christ's name. Amen.
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 Thank you ever so much.
Thank you all. Thank you for this conversation. We look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, Phina. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, everybody.
God
Bye.
bless.
Thank you.